Hello and welcome to the Duquesne Sports Pregame Show live from the Union Broadcast Center. I'm Jack Morgan, alongside me, Nick Fernbaugh. And we're here in the big studio because it's a big game. It's the A10 tournament second round matchup between the Dukes and the Rams. And Dukes are hoping that third time is a charm as they dropped the second meeting to Rhode Island on the road just about a week ago. Actually, a week and a day to the date. So it's a pretty recent meeting that these teams had that has a lot of value heading into the tournament. But Nick, we'll start with Duquesne's path because let's set the table, reset the season. It's a whole new ball game, and Duquesne is the 7th seed. They will be facing the 10 seed Rhode Island. If they're able to win, they will go on to play the number 2 seed VCU. We've been talking about bracket scenarios for about a month and a half, but Nick, it's finally here.
I think what makes tournament time so special is, like you said, it's a clean slate. It doesn't matter fully to an extent. It does for some extent.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know, like, if you finish around the middle of the pack, there's a clean slate. All you have to do is win 4 games to make it if you're in the middle of the pack and you play on the second day. So what's going to need to be important here as we're talking about Duquesne's path to March Madness is they're going to have to get through Rhode Island, VCU, at probably one of Davidson or St. Joe's. Not discounting anybody playing on the first day, but
yeah,
given how things have gone with teams that we'll talk about, Richmond in a minute, from Richmond down, it's been really rough for them. So, I mean, the path's there. It's possible. It's going to take a lot because they're going to have to be a lot of good teams in a row. There's no getting around that. So, especially when we talk about having to beat VCU and then one of Davidson, who Davidson took us to school at our home turf the second time around, and St. Joe's, a tight but heartbreaker that they lost in OT early in conference play, 97-90, I believe. So, it's going to be interesting as we get into tournament play to see not just how Duquesne does, but how kind of a lot of these a lot of teams sitting around the middle with us perform as well, as they got to go up against some really tough teams, 2 of which in VCU and St. Louis are either in or right on the bubble.
Yeah, I think the fascinating one is GW and Fordham. It kind of feels like that is a game with meddling teams that honestly played good basketball at times and could be poised to give St. Louis a run for their money. Well, speaking of a run for their money, Duquesne had one on Saturday as Richmond put an early scare into the Dukes. However, they made some history along the way in a win that was unbelievable. They were down 38-8 with 6:43 left in the first half. It became 40-10, and things just did not look good. However, the rest of the way, they outscored them 71-39. That is the biggest comeback win by a wide margin. The previous was 19. But then I learned this after. That is the 4th largest comeback win in NCAA history. So a heck of a high that Duquesne's riding here into this A10 tournament in their own backyard. And we've seen it a lot this week so far, from the coaches to the players who have even been out on the Duquesne campus trying to get people to come to the game and to be excited. And when you have a win like that and a motive like that, I mean, it's easier to do than if they had lost that game, I'd imagine, right?
I mean, without question. I mean, lost within that was the fact that more than just they went down 40-10, and I have a funny story from this. I was seeing my one friend who just came back from the Army. I just dropped him off and saw the score was 28-8. Then it got to 37-8, and I just turned off my phone until I got home. And that was the end of the first half. And it was a lot harder to stomach the fact that if they didn't win this game, that they were going to go into the tournament losing, I believe, 5 straight.
Yeah.
Which I don't think there's coming back from that if that happens. And to not only get a win, but for it to be Dave Dixon who gets the buzzer beater.
My gosh.
I don't think it gets much better than that. I mean, he has played the most games here of any Duquesne player, and I'm so glad that he was able to be rewarded with one last win here at the Cooper Fieldhouse, because I feel like stuff like that, it's like you said, it felt like when that happened, it cleaned the slate. Like,
Yeah.
It was obviously bad that they lost 4 games, especially the losses to Davidson and Rhode Island were really bad. But the fact that they were able to come back and have that like miraculous and insane win shows how tough this team can really be, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when you look at games like that, it's a massive emotional boost, no doubt. But I mean, just mentally as well, you're in a better spot than when you are on an actual 5-game losing streak. I think coming back into that game and tying it like they did, but then finding a way to lose it probably would have. I mean, it wouldn't have done them as they wouldn't have really done them anything. You're still losers of 5 straight. You played so bad to the point where even when you made this miraculous comeback, it was too little, too late. So massive, massive, massive win for them. But lost in all, it shouldn't be lost in all that the last time these teams played was probably the worst performance Duquesne has had all season, and it came off the heels of a really bad loss to Davidson, a game against St. Louis that they fought their way back into, and just really that brutal game against Dayton. So it was just an awful stretch for them. However, it should also be pointed out that they did beat the Rhode Island Rams. They beat them 76-61 on what was a very dominant performance by them, and one I was not able to be there for. So it was their first home win, and they've had a couple more of those since then. But now you get to that third game; it's a rubber match. We saw this a couple years ago, or even last year. St. Bonaventure.
Yeah.
You've seen it 2 years in a row because you saw them in the semis the year before that. So once you get to this point, you'd have to figure that both these teams know each other very, very well.
I would think so, especially because, as we'll get to the keys in a minute, but where I think one thing has been keyed in is that both teams, I feel like, see each other very well. Like, they know where their strengths and weaknesses lie. Sometimes you don't always get that. Sometimes it feels like you're kind of playing a chess match through a game. But I feel like with Duquesne, Rhode Island, at least it's been like that at least the past few years. You kind of know where these two teams are, especially because, and they're pretty even. I mean, I know Duquesne's technically losing in the overall history, but they're 30-35. And I feel like they're doing pretty good as a whole recently from what I remember. I think they've won, 5 of their last 6 or 5 of their last 7 against Rhode Island. They've done very well against this unit. So I'm hoping that translates, especially because they got that big win at home. And that's kind of the thing that projected them to this big winning streak that we thought at the time was going to put them in a top 4 spot, beating teams like GW and George Mason, that last minute heroic against LaSalle, even though that was very ugly. There was a lot of good that came through that stretch of basketball. And I think it's going to be key when we see this game is how level are the playing fields going to be. They each have very big strengths and some common weaknesses from what I have been able to find. Yeah. It will be very interesting.
So that being said, why don't we get into the keys to the game for both sides? Let's start with you, Nick, and then maybe while you're at it, maybe a bonus, maybe a player to watch, perchance.
I could definitely give you a player to watch. Let's start with the keys. So the 3 points I made clear through this is that the magic number is 70. We saw it. Rhode Island is averaging about 69 points through conference play. So this team doesn't score that well. In fact, from what I remember seeing, their scoring margin through conference play, actually it's even worse. They're only averaging 66.6 points. Again, they are 12th. They have not scored well through conference play. So when I'm talking about that magic number of 70, they got to play good defense. And where they've also struggled has been rebounding. They've been towards the bottom of the A10 through the entire year through non-conference and conference in rebounding. So Jure and guys like that and Cochran, they have to box out like their life depends on it because it does. Because it's not a good skill they have, and they got to lean on the guys who are good rebounders on this team to make up for the rest of the team that's not. And the last thing for me, because this is how they beat us, they force turnover after turnover after mistake after mistake, and that is a key thing. If they can force mistakes, because their turnover ratio is fantastic. They have the second largest turnover margin in the through conference play, averaging 1.5 positive turnover margin. a game. That's insane. That's really good. The only team better is Richmond, ironically. So again, teams that maybe not at the top of the table, but where Rhode Island has been able to win is forcing mistakes. And that's where some of the top teams really struggle. And I would say even Duquesne has had these struggles with turnovers. It's not as bad as other teams, but it is still there.
34 turnovers in both games combined for the Duquesne Dukes against the Rhode Island Rams. So Duquesne will hope that it does not get to 50 combined turnovers over 3 games, or else they could be in a little bit of trouble. We'll get to the Duquesne keys of the game now, and the first one, be dominant on the boards. The way they were able to come back against Richmond was a wide advantage they had in the offensive rebound category. It was 15-3 in favor of Duquesne. It was unreal. So 3 offensive rebounds. 15-3. Unreal. They out-rebounded them by 10, so they actually lost the defensive rebounding battle, but they won the offensive by such a wide margin. But if they're able to continue that momentum you got on the glass, that's a big deal. Then also, let's talk about the top 4 scorers, and those are kind of your players to watch. They're your focal point once you get to a certain point in the season. Jimmy Williams, Terrence Ginyard, Alex Williams, Dave Dixon. Those are your 4 guys. There's no tricks, no games. It's absolutely those are your guys now. So they need to show up. They have been showing up. No reason to believe that they won't keep showing up, and that will be a big deal for Duquesne, a big plus in that category. And then defense, stops. They had a lot of experience in getting some high-pressure stops in that Richmond game, and you've had all season kind of find ways defensively that you're going to be able to get a stop when you need it. You're going to need stops at a number of different moments in this game. So, with that being said, get them. It's gonna matter a lot, and they need every one of them, and especially in games like this. I mean, we've been to tournament games now for about 2 years, and it's pretty clear what the message is and how important stops are. Obviously you can score all you want, but these games tend to end around in the 60s or 70s. So quite frankly, I think you're going to see that magic number of 70 matter for both sides, because Duquesne obviously has had games in the last few weeks that they have struggled offensively. So we'll see if they're able to continue the momentum from the Richmond game. And I think that's going to play a big factor in aiding those 3 keys to the game. So let's get to our game predictions. By the way, if Duquesne is able to pull off this win, yes, we will have a pregame show.
Yes.
Just don't quote me on when it will be posted and how we're going to do it. But it will happen. So let's do it. Duquesne, Rhode Island, second round of the A10 tournament. Who you got, Nick?
Okay. So as we're getting ready for this, I'll actually quickly bring up my key player for Rhode Island, as mine's going to be R.J. Johnson, because where the benches really struggled. And I think that's where it's going to be a big key battle. Both benches have not been great for Rhode Island and Duquesne outside of Alex Williams. And I think what you're going to be seeing is how does someone like R.J. Johnson match on Jimmy Williams? I think that's going to be the key matchup. And I think, unlike last time where R.J. Johnson forged 2 steals, scored 14, I don't see that happening. And I honestly feel like if what I'm looking at is similar to how they played the first time, I think the steals were a little more of an outlier. And trying to force your game plan around making a lot of mistakes it's a very volatile thing, I personally believe. I think Duquesne is going to play cleaner basketball. It's at their home turf, roughly around their home turf.
It's a home turf.
And I think they get this done. I think Duquesne takes this. I'm going to say a final score of 73-64.
All right, so not much of a heart attack there, quite possibly. I'm sure that Duquesne fans will be happy to hear that. However, I'm going to go with a lot, much closer. Maybe not a lot, but I'm going to go under 5 points here with this one. I think that Duquesne and Rhode Island, by the time you get to the third matchup that you play between, against an opponent like Rhode Island or vice versa, Duquesne, it's measured in inches, like the difference between the two sides. The margin of victory is very small. So I think that is going to ring true here. I think Duquesne does get the win. I think they win this one 69-65. I quite frankly, I don't think they're getting to 70. I think this is going to be just a slugfest of defense and just defensively. I think there's going to be a lot of pushing and shoving. I think there's going to be a good amount of fouls. However, if really we've been taught anything, is that do not believe and completely trust any team in the A10 to consistently make free throws, especially not Duquesne at times. So, listen, I think this is going to be one that is going to be a grit and grind. It's going to be a grinded out type game. But Duquesne has their home fans there. They sold out their ticket allotment of 500, I believe. Yeah, it was 500. They got tickets. They sold all those out. Or, excuse me, I apologize. Let me get that right. The student ticket was student tickets. I believe they got 500 of those. They're doing really well with those. Ginyard bought 50 to give it out to students. So if they can get the students to arrive, and I think they will, I hope they do. And especially from what we've seen, the pulse of the community of Duquesne basketball is that a lot of people are excited about it, and there's going to be a lot of people at the Coop. It's a 5 p.m. game. It's very manageable. I think that is going to be the edge that Duquesne needs. And hey, something they can carry into the game against VCU. Who knows? Duquesne gets it done in this one, but it's not going to be a runaway train. It's going to be a close one. So listen, keep it here at DSTV for all the coverage for the A10 tournament, not just Duquesne, but all 14 teams. That'll do it for the Duquesne Sports Pregame Show. For Nick Fernbaugh, I'm Jack Morgan. We're saying so long and enjoy the game. And hey, maybe we'll see you in a little while for a second pregame. Why not?